The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
Zach LaVine just went absolutely nuclear in Detroit as the Kings beat the Pistons 127-117.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast.
We have to talk about from the team perspective, and all those guys plus more played a part in this. This was a gritty, physical, hard-fought, proud victory and effort by the Sacramento Kings. Like, there's just no other way to put it, right? Throw away all the frustrations that we've had with this team. Hell, 3 games ago, the Kings lost to the Washington Wizards, and I was crashing out here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Throw everything away. Just focus on what the Sacramento Kings did tonight, how they performed tonight. That is, I mean, it's a slogan, it's a cliche, it's something that some people might roll their eyes at, but that's Sacramento proud. That's representing the city. That's what Kings fans want, expect, demand, respond to, and pour their hearts, loyalty, love, and support into without hesitation. Efforts and fight like that, like what we just saw from the Sacramento Kings. No Keegan Murray, out for the second straight game with a back injury. Malik Monk goes down with an injury in the first quarter, is held out the rest of the game. It's the third game in 4 nights, and the Kings starters played between 39 and 42 minutes the night before when they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. They fell behind by 18 points at one point in Detroit on the final game of a 6-game road trip. Not just that, the final game of the final road trip this season. All reasons to stack the deck against the Kings and for them to kind of just go, you know what? Not our night. Is what it is. Let's hop on a plane and let's head back to Sacramento. Now, none of us would have accepted that mindset. None of us would have been okay with that excuse considering the games that the Kings have dropped throughout the course of this season, but especially earlier on in this road trip when they started the road trip 0-3. But so many valid reasons for the Kings not to give us the effort that they provided through the second half of this game. And offense is going to take center stage. What Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan did especially is going to take center stage. But I wanted to make sure I started with this stat specifically. The Kings' defense held the Detroit Pistons to just 45 points in the second half after they gave up 72 points in the first half. So we'll talk about Zach LaVine going nuts. We'll talk about DeMar DeRozan's big shots. But holding the Pistons to 45 points, nearly a 30-point improvement from the first half to the second half on the road, all those circumstances I just laid out. That is very impressive. Very impressive to me. Something that regardless of how I feel about this team, regardless of how I feel about this season, I'm not going to turn my nose up at and ignore because it doesn't fit my narrative of what I believe this team to be. That goes beyond feelings. That is acknowledgement of true effort, hustle, intensity, winning basketball. Everything anyone who calls himself a Kings fan could ever ask for. The Kings gave them that. These players gave them that on the final game of this road trip, and that needs to be acknowledged first and foremost. Before we talk about each guy individually, I want to talk about the Kings' big 3. You can call them the old 3, the veteran 3, the big 3 in Sacramento, which is Domantas Sabonis, Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan. Here's how the 3 of them have performed over this 3-game win streak, over this 3-game and 4-night stretch. In the Kings win in Charlotte, Zach LaVine, 25 points, 10 rebounds. DeMar DeRozan, 22 points. Domantas Sabonis, 24 points, 11 rebounds. In last night's win over the Cleveland Cavaliers, Zach LaVine, 37 points. DeMar DeRozan, 28 points, 7 assists. Domantas Sabonis, 27 points and 9 rebounds. And now tonight in Detroit, Zach LaVine, 43 points. DeMar DeRozan, 37 points. Domantas Sabonis, a 19-point, 15 rebound, 10 assist, triple-double. Heavy minutes for the starters. Injuries to starters and key rotation players. No Jake LaRavia as well. He's been out. And your big three, your top three guys are stepping up in a major way at the end of this road trip, at the end of a season, at the time where you want to try and get hot and start playing your best basketball with the postseason looming. Your top three guys are stepping up. That deserves to be acknowledged. All right, no more beating around the bush. Zach freaking LaVine. Holy crap. What a heater. Like that, we saw him go on a heater similar to that in Sacramento earlier on this season. I think it was in early March or sometime around that time. Maybe not. Maybe it was late February. I honestly don't remember. Maybe it was very, very beginning of March. Zach LaVine was on a heater at that time too. It was during that time where he won the Western Conference Player of the Week. This was nuts, right? Like every single time he touched the ball over like a 4 or 5 minute stretch when Zach LaVine scored 16 straight points to end the third quarter and to open the fourth quarter. He scored 16 straight points for the Kings by himself. That's not a 16-0 Kings run. That's a 16-0 Zach LaVine run. Where every time he touched the ball and the defense was up on him, he just looked at the rim, pulled, and it was nothing but net every single time. LaVine's final stat line tonight, 43 points, 16 of 28 from the field, 8 of 11 from three-point range, also had 4 assists. Over the last 2 games combined, over the last 2 days, Zach LaVine has scored 80 points. Crazy. I talked about this after the Cavs game, and I'll reiterate it. This is what you need and expect Zach LaVine to be. I'm not talking about the point totals. I'm not even talking about the shot attempts. Zach LaVine, you are a microwave scorer. You are a bucket. Your job is to put the ball in the hoop and catch fire and get into that zone like you got in tonight where it doesn't matter who the defense throws at you. It doesn't matter where you're playing. You have a ball, there's a hoop, and every single time you throw it up, there's a very good chance it's going in that hoop. That is Zach LaVine's job. He is an offensive merchant. I don't care about the defense. I don't care about the playmaking. I don't care about assists. I don't care about rebounds. All that stuff is nice, but that's not you. That's not your job. This is what I expect from Zach LaVine on a game-in, game-out basis for the next 2 years that I believe he's going to be wearing a Kings uniform. Doesn't mean he's always going to have hot shooting nights, and there are going to be games where he maybe shoots you out of a game because he takes 15 shots and only makes 4 or 5 of them. That's going to happen. But this is what Zach LaVine is. This is who he is. This is what he does. I don't want to see the Kings try and make him anything different. What you do is you surround him with pieces that make up for those struggles, make up for the defense, make up for the rebounding, make up for the playmaking. Go and get him a true point guard. He doesn't have to be your number one option. He doesn't have to be your star, but his job is to score. Don't expect him to do anything less. And if it doesn't work, well then, oh well. That's the risk you take when you trade for Zach LaVine and make him a centerpiece of your team. But this is who Zach LaVine is. Shoot the ball and don't stop shooting. And then there's DeMar DeRozan. Super steady, super reliable. It's amazing that a 37-point performance can be overshadowed, and Cade Cunningham also scored over 30 for Detroit tonight, and he got big time overshadowed by LaVine. But 37 points, 14 of 26 from the field, 4 rebounds for DeMar DeRozan. He and LaVine are the 5th duo in the Sacramento era history of the Kings organization to score 35 or more points. I think Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox did it. I'm pretty sure De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis did it. I think Isaiah Thomas and Marcus Thornton did it. Like, there haven't been too many duos that have both scored 35 or more points in a game in Sacramento's history. LaVine and DeRozan added themselves to this list. And look, this is I know things have not worked out for DeMar ultimately here in Sacramento. I do still believe, regardless of what happens for the rest of the season and beyond, I do think DeMar DeRozan's days in Sacramento are numbered. I think the Kings are going to want to move on. I think he's going to want to move on. That could change, I suppose, but as of right now, I think that's the expectation. That being said, while DeRozan has his faults, and he's had struggles at times fitting in with Sacramento, the one thing that it's easy to take for granted that I think Kings fans are going to miss the most about DeMar if this is his only season in Sacramento. It's the thing that I told you about, that an assistant coach told me about this past offseason after the Kings acquired DeMar. When the Kings are struggling offensively, when it's in a rut, or it's late in the shot clock, or whatever, and they just need someone to go out and get them a bucket, DeMar's that dude. So even when Zach LaVine's going absolutely nuts, it's DeMar DeRozan hitting a tough turnaround jumper to help ice the game, and he's hitting the too small as he's running down the floor. Now, DeMar will take some shots down the stretch of the game, and you live or die with it, and it has killed the Kings at times, for sure. But the reliability of DeMar DeRozan as just a straight bucket getter for Sacramento is something that, yes, I and so many Kings fans have taken for granted this season.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The Heat turned it on midway through the fourth quarter, taking control to get the win.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast.
The Heat's win over the 76ers, 117-105 is the final score. No Bam, no Andrew Wiggins for Miami in this one. Tyler Hero did return from his one-game absence. The Sixers were without Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and a million of other guys. So skeleton crew for them as they continue to try to move their way down the Eastern Conference standings. But this was, despite the injuries, a tie game for three quarters. The Heat then go ahead and outscore the Sixers 34-22 in the fourth quarter. And that win, this win, puts Miami in position to play for a potential home court advantage in the 9-10 game against the Bulls if they beat the Chicago Bulls in Chicago on Wednesday. Also a key game to watch for Heat fans interested in such a thing. Chicago-Cleveland on Tuesday night. So the win keeps the Miami's hopes of moving up to 9 or maybe even moving up to 8 alive here. I want to talk about the Khalil Ware part of this here in a second, but before we get to that, the chances of moving up to 9 or 8 in the East still alive after this game. David, would moving up in the standings change the way that you think about Miami's chances in the playoffs?
No, not necessarily, because I think they've been such an inconsistent team. Even tonight's performance kind of shows that this was a win that, for whatever reason, and I understand the loss of Bam is a significant one because of everything he does defensively and all the glue that he provides in terms of keeping things steady and making them appear to be at least a semblance of a team. And with him out, you could tell early on, and for most of the game, that they were kind of discombobulated and not really prepared defensively, especially for a team that they haven't scouted against, that they're not familiar with. You have big performances from Quentin Grimes. You have big performances from Lonnie Walker, the fourth. And it was just something that maybe this team was unprepared for, which is, shouldn't be the case because, you kind of have to know who you're facing on a night-to-night basis. But there are mitigating factors here. and yet you're tied with them until the 8.5-minute mark of the fourth quarter. That's not good. And yet we also saw them be really, really good against some decent teams and also against some bad teams, with which Philadelphia certainly won during their 6-game win streak. And yet before that, they had lost 10 games in a row. So we've talked about this all season. We don't know what version of this team we're going to get on a nightly basis. And that's what makes the play-in tournament such a dangerous proposition, because you might get the really worst version of this team that can't hit a three, that can't pass the ball, that can't defend at a high level. And next thing you know, you're going to get blown out by the Hawks or the Bulls or whoever you wind up facing in that play-in tournament. But you also could get the team that really beat the pants off of the Golden State Warriors, or beat Boston very well, or competed against the Cleveland Cavaliers and competed against the Memphis Grizzlies, etc. Like, you could get a very good version of this team on a night-to-night basis. So regardless of who their opponent is, I don't know what their chances are going to be. And I know that's not the answer you're probably looking for, but I think it's also the reality of what this team is they can beat any of those teams in the play-in tournament. They could even make a first-round series against the Cleveland Cavaliers competitive if they're playing their very best and they're healthy. But there's no guarantee that that's going to be the case. And I don't know whether or not I could predict that, because maybe Wiggins doesn't come back. Maybe he's a shell of himself once he does come back. Maybe Bam has to miss time, etc. Like, there could be a lot of different factors here. So I'm not concerned about the opponent so much as I have to focus on what version of Miami we see on a nightly basis or from a game-to-game basis. And that being the case, it doesn't really matter where they end up in the standings, although you'd like them to continue to win out and build off that and have the kind of confidence that we saw them have during the 6-game win streak. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into whatever play-in tournament games they have.
Yeah, we were talking maybe a week ago during the 6-game win streak. Boy, it looks like this team is peaking right at the right time. And then a couple injuries happen, and now it looks like, oh, maybe they're not peaking. Now it looks like they're limping back into the play-in tournament, which has been the story for this team over the last couple of seasons, and then the third one, including this one. I don't know. Like, in terms of the consistency part of this team, we talk about this all the time with superstar players. The superstar power, right? The superpower that makes a player a superstar is consistency. It's not the heights that these players have. Corey Brewer scored 50 points in a game. He wasn't a superstar.
Wow.
You know, it's doing it night in and night out. The superstar superpower is consistency. And the same applies to teams. Good teams, the superpower behind the good teams, behind the Thunder, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Celtics, is their consistency.
Right.
That's the superpower. Anybody can win a game. The Wizards won games this year. The Wizards have blown teams out this season. They stink, right? Nobody in Washington is looking at that game like, boy, you know, we blew out that one team that one time in January. We should be a little bit better, shouldn't we? Like, nobody's looking at the Wizards that way. And the Heat are weird, and these 500 teams are all kind of weird because sometimes they do it and sometimes they don't. But the superpower is the consistency. And so they don't have that superpower. And they haven't had that superpower in the regular season for 3 years now. Their superpower in the playoffs was a little bit different. I don't think they have that superpower this year. And I'm not even talking about necessarily Jimmy Butler, although that's a big part of it. But there's more than that too, right? Right now, this is a young team. Pluck Jimmy Butler off this team the way that we just did. This is a young team. Bam is 27. We think about him as this vet because he's been on 2 finals teams. And certainly he's very experienced. And I think he is, you can consider him a veteran, but he's only 27 years old. This guy's just sort of starting his physical prime, right? Tyler Hero is maybe in his prime now, maybe just at the very beginning of it, kind of starting to dip a toe into his prime. I don't even know. This is not a veteran team by any stretch. And so, yeah, when we look and zoom out and say, okay, well, if this team was to move up to 9 or even 8, and I only include 8 in here because mathematically they're not eliminated from it, but they're not getting to the A spot. We all know that. So we're talking about a team that's going to end up in the 9-10 game. We're talking about home court advantage in 1 game. It doesn't matter, man. And I see myself, like, I had this whole thing prepared if the Heat were going to lose this game to Philadelphia, being like, best case scenario, who cares? Tank out the rest of the season. These games don't matter for Miami down the stretch here. But whatever. I guess you get 1 game at home against the 10 team if you end up getting this 9 seed, and maybe that sets you up to travel and beat the loser of the 7-8 matchup, and you back your way up into the playoffs. And lose to Cleveland or Boston, or lose to Cleveland, I guess, in that scenario. But I don't know that the seeding matters much to me. Although I guess you got to give credit to the Heat. They're at least playing for something here, and they care about it. It seems like.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I think if they didn't care, they would have just rolled over when Philadelphia had tied everything up midway through the fourth quarter. Like, again, I was thinking it was 88 all with 8.5 minutes left.
Are we sure Philadelphia didn't roll over?
No, I think even Grimes was still doing his thing. I think Miami tightened their defense a little bit, and you started getting some timely shots from Kyle Anderson and Duncan Robinson. Yeah, I mean, there was clear intent for them to find a way to win. They weren't just taking bad shots or they weren't coughing the ball up. They played better during that stretch than they had for the previous 40 minutes. It just, it was not great. And again, easier to do against a bad team. And you see that, like with Philadelphia, as much of a gutsy performance as it was from them, something that pains me to admit, they also, because they're not good, they're not consistent, they're not deep, they hit those good performances, and then Miami punches them, and they're kind of like, oh, okay, well, we're really not going to try that much after this point, and then eventually they kind of just let Miami run roughshod on them, and that's what a lot of teams have done against the Sixers group all year. So, it's I don't know what to make of this Heat team. I really don't. I contend that they can be good enough to challenge whoever they face.
What does that mean, challenge?
A competitive series. I think it would feel like a moral victory because it's not going to result in winning the series. But if you go up against Cleveland, I kind of like Miami's chances of making it competitive. I could see this going 6 or 7 games against Cleveland.
Okay, I can't. But maybe the games.
Cleveland's going to beat them, like sweep them. Gentlemen, sweep.
I don't know. I think the Heat would win 1 game. Does that count as
Healthy?
challenging them? I don't know.
No, it's not.
6 games would be a challenge. 5 games is a gentleman's sweep. Yeah, I don't look. I would love to be surprised. I don't. I think the Cavs are awesome, and I think that they've been playing poorly lately because these games don't matter. But this is a team that has 2 different 15-game win streaks. In terms of winning multiple games in a row, no team has been better at that in this season than Cleveland. So I just have a hard time seeing it. But we did also on the East Squad show. And that'll come out later on Locked On Heat feeds on Tuesday afternoon. But we had the whole conversation about who's the East play-in team that the top teams would least want to face. Cleveland and Boston, obviously. And my answer is still the Miami Heat. You've got Eric Spoelstra. You've got a team that's going to be physical. You've got a guy like Bam Adebayo who's going to muck up everything that you want to do offensively, and that's just annoying for teams to deal with, especially in the first round. They're like, we have to deal with maybe one of the best defenders in the league and maybe the best coach in the league in the first round. Like, that's not exactly what we thought we were signing up for when we had one of the best records in the league. But I don't think any of these teams are really gonna. I just think Boston, Cleveland are so much better than everybody else in the East. But go ahead.
Well, no, but I mean, we should at least mention the consensus though was that Miami was not the team that those top contenders wanted to face. I thought that
most of the people on the show thought it was going to be Chicago, and I'm like, come on. Really?
Like, there's this assumption that Chicago has been. I mean, as the broadcast pointed out, they've won 12 of their last 16 games. They have been very good to close out the season, and they were really bad for most of the regular season, and they've just been really good of late, which is why Miami finds himself in this quote unquote battle against the Bulls for the play-in tournament. Wednesday's game against Chicago is not necessarily an easy one for Miami. So
it's must watch, man. It's one of the biggest games left of the season. Wednesday night. Are more people going to be tuned in for Dallas's return to, or Luka's return to Dallas, or the big 9-10 everything hangs in the balance game?
Well, I could say one game is probably going to be more competitive than the other one, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the Miami-Chicago one.
There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute Major League Baseball showdown or soaking up the excitement of a high-level NBA matchup. Finding great seats at a great price, though, that has long been a challenge until game time. All baseball season long, you can snag great deals on good seats the closer it gets to first pitch. Plus, Game Time shows you your view from your seat before you buy. That way, you won't get stuck behind a column and miss half the game. I can't recommend Game Time enough. They show you the all-in price on each ticket. That way, you know exactly what you're paying for, and you don't get hit with surprise fees. You'll even have the peace of mind with Gametime, who have the cancellation protection and even job loss insurance, so I can buy with confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Joe Cronin gets a contract extension from the Trail Blazers.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast.
It was announced today by the team that Joe Cronin agreed to a multi-year contract extension. He's sticking around. On the strength of the best 12-month stretch of the Cronin tenure, the Blazers decide to extend their lead basketball decision maker, and now he will guide them out of the rebuild and into hopefully just what they call building at some point here in the very near future. But the challenges, there are still major challenges ahead for Cronin. I think the hardest part of his job is actually what's out on the horizon, not what's behind him. But in today's program, I want to talk about what is behind him. We'll talk a little bit about the sort of full scope of Cronin's tenure since he took over in an interim role in 2021 and then was promoted to the full-time job, the big chair in 2022. The bumps along the way, the things that he's gotten right, and particularly his recent success. Much of the reason why he got extended today, and it was announced by the team as multi-year extension, they did not disclose the terms. None of the reporters around the team have had they didn't disclose the terms either. And Shams Charania, who initially reported the story before the Blazers of ESPN, did not disclose those terms either, because that's not the kind of thing Shams does. He doesn't care about details. He just wants headlines. In any case, maybe at one point we'll find out kind of the deal with how long Cronin is around. To be totally clear, I didn't even attempt to do any reporting. I was at my day job. I didn't make any phone calls, send any text messages, send any emails. So that one's on me. In any case, what the Blazers announced as a multi-year extension. And the reason that Cronin got a multi-year extension is because this has been the best stretch of his tenure, right? He took over in 2021. Neil Olshey gets fired. Joe Cronin is promoted in an interim basis and then eventually gets promoted to the full-time job and begins got tear down, quite frankly. I know it started with giving Damian Lillard a big contract, but it was, for my money, very obviously a tear down from the moment Joe Cronin really got control. We'll talk about that, and because a huge part of Joe Cronin's legacy is that he made the biggest trade, or one of the biggest trades with respect to Clyde Drexler, one of the biggest trades in franchise history, right? A massive one with Damian Lillard. Huge part of Cronin's legacy, absolutely, maybe the defining moment of it, certainly to this point, the defining moment of his career. You hope, if you're Joe Cronin, it ain't the defining moment of your career, because you hope the things that come next are the thing that define you. That's why I'm hedging a little bit. But the reason that he got this contract extension is because they've had such success over the last 12 months. I want to be totally upfront here. I have been plenty critical of Joe Cronin on this podcast. Plenty critical. Heck, the last show I recorded, I mentioned how I just didn't understand what the Blazers did last weekend. I don't get it. I don't get it, right? And Cronin is certainly at the top of, he's in the big chair. He's the lead decision maker. So when they do something that puzzles me, an unimportant podcaster, that's not part of his legacy, but he's involved in that, right? I've been plenty critical of him here. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm someone who's always sung his praises. I do think in general, there's the way the internet works is there's a section of the internet that thinks Joe Cronin is the worst GM and the stupidest person alive. And those people are wrong. And there's a section of the internet that thinks Joe Cronin is the savior of the franchise and one of the great GMs and builders of in the history of the sport. And those people are wrong too, because it's always in the middle. It's the polls, particularly just in the digital age, the polls are wrong. That's POLE. You folks on either end of the spectrum, you're both incorrect in your own special ways. The truth is in the middle. He's done some good stuff and some bad stuff, but I think over the last 12 months, it's mostly been good. Part of that is his draft picks, right? Cronin has made three top 7 picks, twice at 7 with Shaden Sharp and Donovan Clingan. In the middle, he picked at 3 with Scoot Henderson. And the lottery picks have shown some promise. Shaden Sharp had some moments his rookie season and then kind of had a lost year 2. And in year 3, there's been some peaks and valleys like with any young player, but in general, you're starting to see the best version of Shaden Sharp we've seen. Maybe like the last 2 games haven't been ideal, but I would say the last stretch of basketball he's played is like you're starting to see like, oh yeah, he's putting stuff together, he's making progress. Scoot Henderson, like obviously the year 1 was so low for Scoot that the graph had to go up because that was pretty much the only way it could go. But I think Scoot has shown real signs in year 2. Just like for me personally, I think he's moved from a guy who I'm like, oh man, how is he going to stick in this league to being like, yeah, he's going to be an NBA starter. Like, I don't know beyond that, whatever, but like, I have real confidence that Scoot ends up being a long-term NBA starter now. And certainly you can be a lot more because it's his second season in the league as a 21-year-old, right? But I think year 1 was rocky enough that it was like, he needed to show progress, and he certainly did. And obviously he's still got plenty of things to grow with, but I think Scoot has been enough better in year 2 to make you feel comfortable that like, if this is what he played like his rookie season, no one would be freaking out. It's just he didn't play like that his rookie season. He really struggled, and the idea was that he was going to be further along because he had played some professional basketball. And Clingan, the last of the lottery picks in order, like even with Klingan's obvious warts on offense, he looks good. He looks like he could be a long-term starter, and like in the league, like he really can defend. He understands his strengths. He's gigantic and he knows it. In a lot of ways, when you're picking at 7, what you're hoping is like, obviously you're always hoping to land a star, an all-star, but like a realistic expectation is like, can you get a starter? Can you get a long-term starter at this spot? And like Shaden Sharp looks like that. I think Clingan looks like that. Scoot, at 3, maybe your expectations are hopefully a little bit higher, hopes are a little bit higher, and I don't think Scoot has exceeded any of those guys in terms of like overall trajectory, but certainly he looks solid. And the Blazers have been solid. In fact, since the calendar flipped, the Blazers have been like just pretty competent. Obviously the like schedule has been soft and they've played some good teams resting their guys, but you really just can't fake the funk for as long as they have. Like maybe you have some questions about their overall ceiling, and I think that's fair, but like the defense has been competent and good enough for long enough, like a defense that's been flirting with top 5 and maybe slipped a little bit out of that recently, but like flirting with one of the 5 best defenses in the league for almost half the season, that's real progress, right? And I will say that I'm going to talk about the trades, right? I'm going to talk about Denny and talk about Tumani here in a second, because that's a huge part of what Cronin has done, and those 2 dudes are the best players on the team this year. You trade for your 2 best players. That's a big part of it.